Have you ever found yourself, functioning perfectly normally on the outside, going to work, keeping up with school, smiling at your friends, but on the inside, you're constantly carrying this heavy, hidden desire to just disappear? Well, if that resonates with you or maybe someone you know, I want to tell you right now, you aren't alone and you definitely aren't imagining things. Today, we're exploring a very specific, incredibly widespread, yet deeply misunderstood condition.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're doing a deep dive into some absolutely fascinating medical commentary from psychiatrist Dr. Takehiro Haga. We're going to break down a condition that completely flies under the radar for most people, historically known as depressive neurosis, or dysthymia. Now, this isn't your standard textbook definition of depression. It's a completely different kind of battle, and it's one that's fought quietly and entirely invisibly.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First, the hidden chronic depression. 2, classic depression versus dysthymia. 3, the drain of internal conflict. 4, why medication isn't enough. 5, building a stable foundation. And finally, number 6, conquering the main fortress.
Let's jump right into Section 1, the hidden chronic depression.
To really understand this condition, Dr. Haga points out that we have to look way past those modern diagnostic checklists that just say low mood or insomnia. It's really about understanding the core nature and the history of the patient. And guys, this core issue is incredibly common. Roughly 2.5% of the population experiences this chronic condition. To put that into perspective for a second, if general depression affects about 10% of people, this hidden variant makes up roughly 1/4 of all depression cases. It's a massive, widespread issue, yet it basically never makes the headlines.
And because it's so prevalent, the medical community has actually recognized it for decades, even though the name itself has evolved over time. It started out as depressive neurosis back in 1968. By the 80s and 90s, it became known as dysthymia, and in our modern manuals today, it's officially called persistent depressive disorder. But honestly, no matter what label you slap on it, the clinical requirement remains exactly the same. We're not talking about a sudden crash that lasts for just a few months. No, this is a chronic, low-grade depression that just drags on for years.
Moving right along to Section 2, classic depression versus dysthymia.
Now, what's really interesting here is how we can think of this as the flat line versus the wave. Classic melancholic depression, that comes with huge dynamic mood waves. Patients experience severe diurnal variations, meaning they might feel utterly paralyzed in the morning, but then they actually feel slightly better by the evening. Plus, they often have visible physical changes. Dysthymia, on the other hand, is a constant flat line. There are no massive waves, no extreme morning crashes. It's simply a state of being low but stable. It is a chronic, 24/7, low-grade sadness. And because these folks are low but stable, we end up seeing this really tragic reality. These individuals are highly functional. They don't look like they're bedridden at all. They're fully capable of maintaining a social life, showing up to work, going to classes, yet just beneath that functional surface, they're burdened by this invisible, chronic desire to just fade away. And that's exactly why it's a hidden suspect, right? Their sheer ability to function perfectly masks their immense internal suffering from the outside world.
Which brings us to Section 3, the drain of internal conflict.
So, you might be wondering, if there aren't massive, visible mood swings, and if the person is still going to work every single day, what exactly is secretly draining all their joy and energy? Well, Dr. Haga identifies the main culprit as internal conflict. This is essentially unconscious psychological friction. Think of it kind of like having a really heavy app running in the background of your smartphone. You might not be actively looking at the app, but it's constantly running, constantly spinning, and just absolutely draining your mental battery down to zero. We all know that specific frustration with our phones, right? Well, this internal conflict often stems from unresolved trauma or deeply complex relationships. Take the phrase, "I love my parents, but I can't forgive them." This brilliantly illustrates the whole concept. It's the presence of mixed emotions, literally opposing forces constantly battling it out in the unconscious mind. When you love someone, but you simultaneously resent them, those two incredibly powerful emotions just continuously clash. And this creates a default mode of absolute psychological exhaustion. The mind is so busy fighting this invisible underground war that there is simply no mental energy left over to actually feel happy.
All right, let's look at Section 4, why medication isn't enough.
So how on earth do we fix a drained mental battery? This brings us to treatment, and why the unique nature of this energy drain requires a very specific clinical approach. In psychiatry, there are 3 traditional pillars of treatment for depression: medication, lifestyle habits, and counseling. Now, while these apply to all depressive disorders, Dr. Haga explains that we really have to look at how each pillar applies uniquely to dysthymia. because frankly, the playbook here is quite a bit different from classic depression.
Let's start with medication. Now, don't get me wrong, antidepressants, which aim to boost serotonin or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, are definitely still recommended. They're for sure better than nothing, but it's a much tougher battle here. See, in classic depression, the brain has dynamic waves. The circuits are temporarily broken and can be repaired. But in dysthymia, because the person has felt this way for literal years, their neural circuits are deeply, deeply fixed in a low state. The brain has completely adapted to this low but stable baseline, which makes it incredibly hard for medication alone to just suddenly snap things back to joyful.
Let's move to Section 5, building a stable foundation.
But hey, here is the good news. This is actually where the lack of mood swings becomes the patient's secret weapon. When it comes to lifestyle habits, dysthymia patients can see absolutely incredible results. The steps are pretty straightforward, but they are highly effective. Step 1, eating 3 stable meals a day, really prioritizing protein. Step 2, incorporating routine exercise. And Step 3, shifting to an early sleep and early morning waking schedule. These habits act like steady, consistent body blows to the illness, gradually raising that baseline of mental energy over time.
So, what's the crucial takeaway here? Why does this work so much better for dysthymia compared to severe classic depression? It's exactly because they are low but stable. They don't experience those sudden, paralyzing crashes that completely derail a person's daily routine. Their lack of massive mood waves means they actually have a much, much higher success rate in building and sticking to these healthy habits. It's a huge advantage.
Finally, we arrive at Section 6, conquering the main fortress. But listen, to truly cure this condition, lifestyle changes just aren't going to be enough. We have to address the root cause. And that brings us to the final and absolutely most critical pillar of treatment, counseling. This is where the real battle happens. Dr. Haga refers to this as conquering the main fortress. And in the vast majority of dysthymia cases, that main fortress is the parent-child relationship. Unlike fleeting adult relationships, like an ex-partner who you can just kind of write off and move on from, the parent-child bond carries immense primal expectations. Thoughts like, parents are supposed to protect me, or parents are supposed to understand. When those deeply held expectations inevitably clash with reality, the emotional knots become incredibly tight, and that creates massive internal conflict. Untangling this knot in counseling isn't just about sitting down and making a logical timeline of your childhood. It requires merging metacognition with raw emotion. So metacognition just means stepping back and analyzing the situation logically. But Dr. Haga stresses that you absolutely must allow yourself to feel the anger, to cry, and to process that raw emotion right alongside the logic. If you just sit there and list facts without actually feeling the pain, well, that energy drain is never going to stop.
An incredibly powerful way to do this is by completely shifting your perspective. Imagine evaluating your 10-year-old self's view of your parents, but using the wisdom of your current, say, 40-year-old self. When you were 10, your parents probably seemed like these flawless, absolute giants. But when you look back as an adult, you realize they were really just stressed, flawed, young adults trying to figure life out, just like the rest of us. This realization, combined with the emotional release of therapy, allows that exhausting, mixed-up conflict to finally resolve. It might resolve into clear anger, or it might resolve into genuine gratitude. But either way, that exhausting back-and-forth battle inside your head finally ends.
Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. I want you to take a moment, look inward, and ask yourself, are you unknowingly fighting an invisible, draining war inside your own mind? And if you are carrying that hidden heaviness while just smiling through your day, is it time to seek support, untangle those knots, and finally conquer your main fortress? Because understanding the true nature of your hidden depression is the very first step to getting your energy and your life back.